Well, hello and welcome. My name is Reed Summers. This is Emergent. It's my pleasure to host you once again tonight as we explore the front lines of the interface between humanity and a potential set of non-human intelligences that may be operating in our world. So much to cover, and I've enjoyed this show and every episode and this walk around of the phenomenon, engaging logic, reason, caution, and responsibility in how we approach this very new and unknown new terrain for us as a species and for us individually as well, because this phenomenon touches the individual maybe like few others do. And for many, they have had an intimate experience of what this phenomenon is like, feels like, and may have been impacted by it very directly in some way. And if you're there, here, I'm not surprised. I'm one of those people as well. So, welcome to Emergent, and we will continue our exploration of the front lines of this phenomenon. The plan for today, we are going to look at the nexus of UAP, NHI, and consciousness. We're then going to examine this new and emergent topic of psionics, the telepathic ability to interface potentially with a non human intelligence. Then I'm going to be going to look at technology, the potential risks of technology of unknown origin, and what impact that might be having already in our world today. And then I would like to talk about, if we have time, the topic of aliens and ask at this point in the game, seeing where the conversation is going, is it time to start talking aliens and not just non human intelligence? And then finally, we'll examine non human intelligent intent. What is the motive and intent for this set of entities to be present in our world, operating as they are? So that's the plan for the day. Please, if you are enjoying the show, like and subscribe, leave a comment, share the show with others. Drop me an email, info@reedsummers.com, with recommendations for show topics, ideas or insights that you're having, or how you're responding to the show in general. I would love to know. Tonight, I invite you also to ask your questions. You can use your smart device to scan this QR code, and that will take you here to the Emergent Slido, where you can ask a question, upvote others, downvote others' questions. And I'm going to make some extended time on this episode to answer your questions for me personally. This is the first solo show I've done in a while. Feels very good to be back in the hot seat and sharing what I have to share, not just being here to support very good and informed guests and sharing what they have to share. And this is also the last bi-weekly live episode of Emergent. Starting next week, I'm going to a new pre-recorded model, and I'm going to be releasing more frequent content of shorter duration, which might make it easier for you to take in all of this information. And I will also be doing interviews of shorter duration as well, and putting a lot more out. So look forward to everything I can share with you and all the new topics we can begin to cover together. So for tonight, I welcome your questions as I wrap up episode 9 and the first 10 or so episodes of this new podcast. Okay, let's dive into this topic of consciousness. So it seems there is a set of forces bringing about renewed interest in the topic of consciousness as it relates to UAP and non human intelligence. And I'd like to just kind of recap what I see happening as we begin to come to terms with this realization that we are being visited by another form of life, another sentience, and that this is causing a massive rethink of us, our human species, and our place in the cosmos. But not just at a 3D physical level, also at the level of fundamental being, the fundamental being of yourself and myself. So, first off, what I see is we are contending with the very basic but profound implication that there are entities that are not human who are sentient, that have some place in this universe. And if you're a religious person, you might question what is their place in God's universe. If you are a spiritual person, you spiritually oriented, you might wonder what is the deeper spiritual connection I might have to these entities. Am I purely human in my lineage? Or if you believe in the soul, is my soul engaged in purely a human project, or is it something much bigger? And so simply the existence potentially of other non-human physical entities arising in this universe gives rise to a major rethink about the fundamentals of the universe in our own minds. I think it also causes us to change our mental map of existence regarding humanity's place. Are we at the center of this universe? Is this really about the human journey in a vast cosmos of barren worlds, rock and gas? Or are we part of an ecosystem of life, or what I might call an exosystem of life? And if so, what are the dynamics of that exosystem? Who's out there? This also causes us to rethink our human origins, our human history, the events that have transpired that have brought humanity to its present state today. Were those purely human events? Were they influenced in some way by a non human intelligence? Have we been under observation? Have we been under containment? People surmise a zoo sort of scenario or a prison planet scenario or something more benevolent, a gardener gardening a plot, and we are, just one of the life forms being stewarded forward. These are speculations, but I understand the need to question the fundamental narrative of the human species that we believe to be true today, all because of the realization of non human intelligence. And now we get into the deeper stuff, which is the demonstrated ability of possible craft of non Earth origin and possible entities who are not human possessing an ability to telepathically engage with human beings, mind to mind. And I think this opens up a whole new panorama of what might be going on, not just from us to them, but between us and each other. I mean, there are reverse implications, retrospective implications for these realizations. We begin to look back on ourselves and imagine maybe we are living in a multi layered reality. I'm not just physical matter, right? Maybe I am simultaneously connected to nodes in a psychic space. And this is an enormous realization for many. For myself, it's not really, because I've been not only exposed to this topic, but involved in such activities of communication, receiving communication for many years. But for many, this is a big wake-up call. What are we really a part of? What is the sea that we are swimming in? Is it a psychic sea in addition to a physical one? And if so, what are the rules and laws that govern the nature of how life interacts and how minds transit that space, that psychic space? I think also the intense paranormal and parapsychological phenomena connected to those who have had direct personal experience is also bringing up this question of consciousness as well. The hitchhiker effect that some have experienced, where they are followed, if not haunted, pervasively and for a long period after coming in contact with some aspect of the physical nature of the phenomenon, whether it's craft or entities. So I think this is also causing us to really wonder, what is it we're interacting with? Is it a physical entity, or is it a non-corporeal entity? Is it angelic or demonic? Is it ghostly or paranormal, as it would have been called some years ago? What's paranormal is now breaking into normality week by week, rapidly. And I think mainstream human life is going to have to contend with these paranormal phenomena and begin to normalize them. And that's a challenging process. And I don't doubt that we're going to get it wrong long before we get it right. And there's going to have to be a lot of speculation and exploration to finally land on solid terra firma with some of this. But I know these aspects, the truly non-physical aspects of the phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, do give rise to the sense that maybe they're not physical. Maybe they are interdimensional. Maybe they are ultra-terrestrial, existing in some co-dimensional space, but right here in the exact space that we're in. I also think there is some speculation about, do NHI interact with non-corporeal entities? Is there a collaboration, a competition? What is the nature of how entities move around in a potential psychic environment? Unknowns. And then there are some potential causes to suspect exploitation of our psychic existence. Is there a, quote, masquerade of angels? Are physical entities possessing either a technology or a power of mind, a power of neurology that can essentially cross the psi-phys barrier, like the blood-brain barrier, the psi-phys barrier, and cause effects and transmit image and sensation and essentially masquerade as non-physical entities? It's possible. We're breaking into this new space, and it's unknown territory. So I understand this need to revisit the fundamental nature of being and the fundamental nature of consciousness as we confront the reality of a potential visitation by non human intelligence, even if it turns out to be true that that is a physical alien extraterrestrial intelligence. It still opens up the universe to us. And I understand the need to explore that. I think there are some very urgent and consequential matters at hand prior to the 100-year exploration of consciousness that we have to get down to. And for those who watch me a lot, I think you know what I'm talking about. If you're new to the show, you're about to hear it today. So look forward to sharing that with you. And I also want to just introduce that there is the religious and spiritual component to this. Again, what are the bounds of our soul's journey in this universe of physical life? Is it a human journey only? Um, are we manifesting in this life right now for reasons that might be more spiritual in nature, or that we might be bringing awareness or a past lineage or memory of life beyond the world into the world to help the world process this event? I suspect that that's possible as well. So there is that religious and spiritual component at play. We are coming to terms with the fact that the universe is much grander than we ever thought, and not just in terms of age and size and physical matter, but potentially in terms of dimensionality. Um, it's not all just rock and gas and whatever biological life might arise via chemical processes. And I think we all know that. I mean, there's plenty of inherent indigenous human knowledge, I would say, about the fundamental nature of who we are. Spiritual teachings and religions have been expressing this for millennia in the world, that we are more than our physical bodies. And so when we interact with other non human physical bodies who potentially have souls, who are able to communicate in non verbal, non visible ways, what does that mean? And what if we can receive those communications and actually interact bidirectionally? What does that mean about us? So I think I just wanted to summarize what I see as the UFO consciousness connection. I'm being asked about that a lot these days. Um, I do believe that there is a physical, hard phenomenon at play. There is a physical alien presence in the world. And I do think there is considerable urgency and consequence to us getting to deal with that. And I see that as kind of on a different time scale than our dealing with the ontological and consciousness level realities of the phenomenon. Fundamentally, it's been 80 years at least since this surge of a hard physical phenomenon of craft in our skies, potentially interacting with humanity. If we don't respond to that in a timely fashion, we may wake up and find ourselves a very different human being with a very different human world. And so that's why I think the urgency is right there. And we can kind of compartmentalize things. It's not exclusive. We don't have to rule things out. We just have to deal with things in a stepwise manner. And I do think the alien nature of the phenomenon is one that demands our attention. But I do think to effectively deal with it, we have to expand our lens upon, what the universe is, what it can potentially bring to our shores, and our capabilities to not only interface with a non-human intelligence, but to perceive them accurately using another power of mind. Because again, this is not just body on body kinetic interaction. This is an interaction of minds. We are the HI, the human intelligence. So I actually think we need to bring a whole lot more of our intelligence to the table in this interplay between intelligences. And if we are ever going to negotiate their intent with our intent, we are going to have to first find our intent and then learn ways of expressing it effectively and enforcing it effectively, meaning to provide force to it. And I want to talk about that in a minute on this topic of CE5, or something I might term differently, group mind, the power of a group mind. I think humanity needs to bring greater power of mind to the table as we interface and negotiate our differing intents with a potential non-human intelligence. So we'll get into that in a minute. But first, I want to introduce this topic that I have been recently introduced to, as I'm sure you have as well, of psionics. Let's talk about psionics, this potential capability that might be inherent to us all, but might be developed very strategically, tactically by government to be deployed in the field for the purpose of engaging UAP and to perform other operations. We do not know what those are yet, but we have some indications that there is such a program to develop psionic capable people, what are called psionic assets. Not a great term. I wouldn't want to be an asset myself. Um, but and to deploy those for specific purposes. So I'm going to let Jake Barber, a whistleblower and firsthand experiencer and witness, tell you what psionics is, and then we can discuss kind of the ramifications of this ability and the popularization of this ability, which seems to be at play, and then the implementation in the field as people seemingly rush to get out there onto the lawn to vector in the craft and interface with non-human intelligence. So let's see what Jake has to say here.
So as I get closer to this pick site, I start feeling odd.
What is a psionic?
A psionic person is someone with a predisposition for extral temporal, you could say, abilities and sensitivities. Someone who has a fantastic intuition.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
So there were people who were purportedly psionically gifted who were brought into the program.
Yes, there were.
Where did they come from?
They come from all over. They're not, and all over, I mean from outside the United States as well as in.
Okay, so basic definition, as I take it, an activated set of psychic abilities, either to receive or to transmit, and to potentially exert some kind of force, mental force, and to be used for some ends. So what this is seeming to cause is something of a gold rush to go make contact with non-human intelligence. And I'm concerned about this as we rush out there without any clear understanding of the entities themselves who we would be engaging, the bidirectional nature of the engagement, nor the information that would be flowing into us and out of us. And yet I know people are rushing to this. And I'd like to just kind of talk around this with you. And I invite you again, put your questions in the Slido. My team here can drop a link in the chat. And let's talk through this question of should people, put this up on screen, it's a poll I just put out, it's collecting votes right now. Should people be encouraged to attempt telepathic communication with non-human intelligence? Interestingly, it's hardly a one-sided answer. So I think there is concern, there is disagreement as to the protocol, the safety of it, whether this should be safely undertaken by just anyone or does this take extra preparation. So again, hearing this from someone who was equivalent to a tier 1 operator in an Air Force or military defense setting is one thing. To just say, let's just do this collectively and just send this out into society and get on the lawn now and host that NHI lawn party 2025. That's another thing. It's another thing. So just a quick look at CE5 from what I understand. It's a structured method and a protocol developed by Dr. Stephen Greer in the J. Allen Hynek classification system, CE 1, 2, 3, 4. He did not create CE5, I believe Greer did. And basically, as far as I know, it is a set of meditation and thought sequencing techniques to still the mind, open up its aperture. And there is obviously a collective element to this where people gather in groups to combine mind. And they basically attempt to vector in the craft using light, sound, intention, positive thoughts, things like that. I have not been to any sort of CE5 event myself. So as best as I can understand though, and this is where we really need to talk through this, What are we really looking at here? Well, we're looking at essentially an individual or group of individuals saying into the psychic ecosystem or shouting, come over here, right? And if you do it in a larger group, you're shouting louder, I guess, lights and sounds, just in case they can't hear you, right? And positive intent, which is presumably engage me, connect with me. But here's my question or set of questions. Who are you inviting in? Who are they? Why are they in our world in the first place? And if they respond to what is, I have to say, a very pathetic statement in the universe, which is, hey, hey, over here, connect with me. Essentially, that seems to be what it is. It's not a very compelling statement to be putting out into the psychic environment. But if they do respond, why do they respond? What is the purpose? What is their intent to do so? But more fundamentally, that would even cause you to pause before even heading out to the field. What is your intent to do so? What are you trying? What are you seeking to get or to experience? Right? And are you? Do you understand the potential psychic link that you're creating with unknown entities? So important questions here. So to walk through this a little bit further, there is the entity and their intent, and there is this rush to engage in the act without really considering that. I don't know if I ever hear people asking the question, how would I vet the intent of this entity or the communication I receive? How can I confirm that this is beneficial to me or positive in nature? What are my criteria? What's the flow chart on that? I don't see that put out there. I just see come one, come all. There's kind of a carte blanche collective run out there imperative. And I don't think this is myself a very safe one to be acting upon. You know, when you think about human life, do you just open yourself, your mind, your house, your affairs to anyone without confirming who that entity is and why they're there? I mean, this is the house, the mind now, right? And there's more windows and doors than we thought. It's not all walls, right? And the doors and windows don't all close. Maybe we don't know how to close them yet. But do we let anything in? And if we do let something in, how do we effectively vet that presence? How do we, for our own purposes of satisfaction and confirmation that this is safe and beneficial, and that it honors some of the relational values that we hold about consensual contact, free will, disclosure, informed consent, things like that? I would want to express that. That would be part of my intent. But I'm not sure that's what I'm hearing from the movement. People just want to come and receive whatever. And I don't think that's a very good prerogative myself. Now, I do want to talk about, though, this reality of generating psychic force, because in my opinion, I don't doubt the protocol or other protocols of similar kind being effective. I doubt what it is they're being used for. What was the intent to engage in them? I think psychic force can be generated by individuals networked in mind and focusing that intent and generating not just a thought process, but also visual imagery, sensation, adding to it, layering on top of it more and illustrative force. I would call that a group mind or a power of group mind. I think this group mind is something humanity actually needs to develop, right? This is a tool, a capability. This is how we project outward some degree of force and presence to say, we are here. This is us. These are the standards by which others can psychically engage in our world or with us. So it's not just a door in, it's a stepping stone out. The question is, what would it be used for? What would be the intent of a group mind at a human collective level, or if you're a group of people wanting to do this at a group level? And I think this is where we have to do the inner work to really come to our own motivations. What am I being motivated by in seeking this contact? I mean, we can be motivated by many different things in life. And some of them can be very self-destructive, self-betraying, mindless. And so if it is mindless, that's a problem. I would make it mindful. What is the intent? So this to me is deeper than this show can go. This is a personal process and a collective process. What is our human intent collectively? And what is my intent for being involved in this topic matter? Maybe it's to experience something that you need to experience that transcends your humanity. I think that's a valid intent. Maybe you would not engage in such protocols because your intent is to not be intruded upon. That's a valid intent. Again, the precursor to all this is coming to terms with what motivates you in the first place. But if the motivation is save me, take me, give me technology, heal the planet, and if it's built upon a foundation of low species self-respect, low regard for humanity, or low hope in there being any prospects for a better world or a world that you hope to receive, failed expectations, undelivered communication, the bedrock of anger, right? And so if that is the bedrock that's driving this seemingly positive extension out to make contact with NHI think we're in trouble, folks. I really do, because we don't know what's out there. A lot of people paint it very simplistically. It's good or bad. They're benevolent or malevolent, or they're angels or they're demons, as if the universe is just this like black and white playing field. And as long as it feels good, it is good. But that's not how life works. It's complex, even down here. We can't walk out of our house into the neighborhood that we've never walked out into and just assume there's good and bad, good people, bad people. There's all kinds of people out there. So you have to learn how to decode intent and how to navigate interaction and engage in interaction. And that is a long process of learning. And I think this is what we really need to engage in. And so, as we open up the aperture to the psychic space, we might find that there are forces present, there are entities in motion, that there are other human minds in motion. We might wake up and realize, shoot, 99% of what I'm experiencing is human, has nothing to do with them. It's the noisy human psychic world, and now I'm becoming open to it. How do you manage that? How do you stay grounded? How do you stay in possession of logic and reason and stay functional as a human being? Multi-capable, not just uni-capable, right? And talk to any psychic out there, and a good psychic will counsel you very well about the degree of caution you should have before opening up your psychic abilities. In fact, that would be a great community of people to bring into this conversation. Where are the psychics? We're talking psionics. Yeah, there's a whole human field of practitioners called psychics, clairvoyants, etc. So they need to be talking too, because they have been engaging in this space already. I think we really need to be wondering and asking ourselves, in a potential interaction, psychically or telepathically, what are we receiving into ourselves and what are we putting out? What is the informational flow? And how do we monitor that? How do we understand the nature of that? Otherwise, we could be leaking out very important information about ourselves that could be used by any entity. And we could be taking in incorrect information, deceptive information, without knowing it as well. It's possible at a whole broad societal level that the pure alien mind present in our world is already filtering down and in, and is already altering the nature of the psychic environment of humanity. That's possible. Maybe part of the detente, the cessation of this frictional engagement that might be occurring with NHI, part of that is we need you to get out of our minds for a little while until we figure out our own abilities and how to manage what flows in and what flows out, and then we'll engage. But if NHI is in our space, right up against our face, interacting with people in their most intimate places, and we do not have disclosure, we do not have transparency, we do not have consensual interaction taking place, and there might be this telepathic force or power that's penetrating us, even at distance. It doesn't have to be up in your face anyway. There is a real risk that we are being influenced in ways we don't understand. And I think we need to begin to ask the questions, how are we being influenced? Especially as it becomes known that this non-human intelligence is operating in our world in the ways that it is. Lastly, CE5, contact protocols, group mind. Just remember, they can do it too. We can gather in a field and vector them in. Yeah, they can gather and vector us in, right? Goes both ways. And I would wager that their ability to do so is a factor well beyond our own. And so fire is fire. Fire is not bad. Fire is fire. They have fire on an order way greater than our own. And if all we're doing is just hoping that they would not use that in any way that is deleterious to humanity, or that contrasts or conflicts with our intent as a human species, we're in for a wake-up call, right? Okay. We cannot inherently trust any group of non-disclosing, covert operating non-human intelligences to manage that fire on our behalf if we can't manage it ourselves, and if we don't even know it exists. So, just to summarize a few key points here. Let's see if I had anything else. Oh, we'll just put this on screen. I put this up on Twitter a few days ago. Just a need to remind people, orbs and eggs giving people warm and fuzzy feelings is not conclusive of the nature and intent of non-human intelligence. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good. Just because another intelligence causes you to have a surge of euphoria doesn't necessarily mean they are benevolent or that they have your best interests in mind. We should look at the full range of encounters, think critically, and don't discard reason and common sense for self-comforting narratives. If feeling good is what's guiding us through this enigma, I'm worried, really worried. There are many things in life that can make you feel good, that can take your life. In fact, 60,000 people die every year in the United States because of just one of them. It's called an overdose epidemic. It feels amazing, right? People flock to it. They have no clue the outcome. And so I'm not associating that to NHI directly. I'm just saying there are massive unknowns here. There are unknown unknowns present in this field of possible psionic interaction with non-human intelligence. And as the public rushes in, I saw today there's a Psionics summit coming up, right? This is broad societal promotion of engagement with non-human intelligence. Did I see in the declaration of that summit any questioning of the NHI or their intent, or any caution, any guardrails, guidelines? No. Come, let's do this. It's essentially the message. I worry about that. This is a Pandora's box, is the truth. We have no idea what we're opening up. I think we do need to go in this direction. I think we need to open up this box. It's about how we open the box. And if something is disabling our logic and our caution and our instincts in the process, that's a problem. And when I see the testimony, even from some of the current whistleblowers coming out, they're not questioning intent, right? Even on the topic of abductions, they're saying things like, yeah, let's do it. I want to be abducted. I'd like that to happen. And I'm thinking to myself, wow. So this is a military trained observer. This is a trained, skilled individual in war games and other intelligence and deception operations, and they're not questioning anything about the entity that's inside of them, communicating that to them, giving them euphoric feelings and sensations. Something is, that's either playing dumb, possible, or something is severely crippling and attenuating our inherent instinct as a species. I see it everywhere, all day. People are not asking questions of the NHI. There is no controversy placed on the NHI. There is a default human bad, ET good. It's got to be that way, right? They're more advanced than us. Look what they can do. And moreover, here's the cynical subtext. They're not human, right? We loathe ourselves. That's a problem. If that's affecting you emotionally and driving you to interaction with a non-human, you should think about that. Really, you should. So we have some work to do to get grounded and devise some really coherent strategies to manage and effectively interface with another form of intelligence before we all rush in. Fools rush in. How many cultural adages do we have like that, right? We know this. I mean, society is full of wisdom regarding how entities should engage with entities. We have knowledge bases built about what consensual relational interaction looks like, that honors and respects the sovereignty of another person, that is fundamentally constructive for both beings. It's a win-win. Go to psychology, go to business development. I mean, my God, we know something about how we humans interface, at least with other humans. I don't think we should just throw that out and say, well, they know, we'll interface on their terms. Because here's the thing, folks, they're in our world. They're initiating contact. They may have non-human rules of engagement. It's fine. I'm sure they do. They're clearly engaging in those. And what we see in the phenomenon are forms of non-human rules of engagement. or protocols for engagement. But we also need to have rules of engagement. This is our house. They are stepping through our front door. Okay? These are our intimate spaces. And I am speaking figuratively, but also literally. The homes of people are being entered by these entities. That is what I'm hearing. And I don't know if it's all true. I'm sure there's some of it that's not, but I have met so many credible people who I feel have had a real experience. It's real for them. And what they say they've experienced is some form of entry and non consensual engagement with these entities. Time to start thinking. So, I'd like to look at a bit of the collective Pandora's box of this as well. Talked about the individual side, but major ethics arise, ethical questions. And I'd like to put this on screen here. I mean, this was eye-popping and ear-popping for me when I heard it in the room at the Soul Conference several months ago. Carl Nell, Hilbert problem number 23. Have NHI been conducting public diplomacy or possibly covert societal manipulation via interaction with close observers, aka psionic engagement with close observers? So, good. Thank you, Carl. That's the kind of question we should be asking on the ethical side of this. There are bystander implications. There are implications regarding children. Children have reportedly been recruited into psionic programs. Now, I know it was said in some of the whistleblower revelations that psionic assets are treated well, always. And I heard that and I shook my head. No, I don't buy that. Not for a second. I've heard from extremely credible people, even more credible than the person who said the thing I just said, that children have been recruited into these programs from third world countries, and that in some cases, these children have died in the act of psionically summoning these craft. So take that as you will, but I don't buy the fact that this is all being done already ethically, so don't worry, it's all good, let's just keep going. I don't buy that. I think we have to ask regarding this ability, which might be vestigial, it might be inherited from a more ancient form of the hominid or Homo sapien, but maybe neglected or dehabituated in our modern existence. It might be vestigial, it might be inherent to all of us. So that's great to know if that's true. But is this constantly active, this ability, or does something activate it? Is it like an antenna? And if so, what puts the antenna into the up position? Is it NHI that's doing that? Is the non-human intelligence actually activating people to become psionic? And then their psionic ability vectors them in? Does it have to do with geography? Is there some sort of electromagnetic or gravitational anomaly that is specific to a location that activates this ability? Is it activated among people who already have it activated? So does it kind of oscillate and increase its strength among two people close together who have this ability? Questions. We don't know. But we need to begin asking. We should also ask, and it's a difficult question, but in the context of abductions, are abductions the thing that is turning this on? And then after abduction, once active, is that what leads to the psionic connection? In part. Could be in part. Could be a minor aspect. I don't know. But if that is true, if NHI are activating psionics in the populace, is government looking into that? Are they willing, as responsible caretakers of the citizenry, to question whether people are being biologically, medically altered through these interactions? I think the question needs to be asked. On that topic, what is the medical or physiologic basis for this human function? Is it the basal ganglia? Is it the caudate putamen? What are the sciences behind the phenomenon? These are questions. I mean, I hear quantum entanglement or neutrino science. Is that what's behind it? We need to begin to ask the question. And then, is this ability of psionics connected to other abilities like remote viewing, which the government has also reportedly used extensively in a variety of operations? Remote viewing being more of an observational, operational deployment of this potential capability. Are psionics a more kinetic deployment of this? Is it more about engaging? I think we need to ask that question. And then let's just call out the elephant in the room. If the government has been using psionic assets in a variety of programs and cultivating these people over many years to have these abilities, and using them on UAP, but also I'm sure other applications. What about Russia? What about China? Are they doing the same? Is anyone in government asking that question? What about North Korea? What if a foreign agent, a psionic asset, were to come into this country and vector in a craft right over the White House to create a disruptive false disclosure event? Possible, right? And so, I mean, I'm only asking these questions because other people are proposing that we all just go out there and start doing this. So, if you're going to propose that, I'm going to question some of this. And somebody has to be the adult in the room and ask questions and drive this bus. I'm not saying that's me. I'm hoping it's actually higher authorities, law enforcement, and those who protect people's physical and mental health, and who draft laws and policies and so forth. But somebody's got to be having these conversations. And I think this extends even further into the question of sovereignty itself. I mean, for one individual to say, I sacrifice my sovereignty to allow another entity to enter my psyche, does that have any impact to the person standing next to them? I mean, because again, in the psychic realm, there might not be hard lines like there is, with tissue and, 6 inches of space, masking distance. There might be no masking distance. So you vectoring in the craft might have an impact on me, your neighbor, who sleeps 10 feet away from, your living room. So there's that question: individual, personal sovereignty, territorial sovereignty. How does the government feel about citizens vectoring in non-human craft to land on sensitive sites, to enter sensitive airspace, private property, sovereign waters, right? I mean, come on, elephant in the room here, people. This has to be looked at. I don't see this being looked at. I have not heard these questions asked before tonight. So help me out. Start asking them with me. These are real considerations, I think. So, kind of in summary here on consciousness and psionics, I think there are some key steps. I think we need to devise some standards and guidelines to steer whatever protocols are proposed to enable direct human NHI contact and communication. I think there has to be some basis upon our shared human values for personal space, safety and survival, pursuit of happiness, what have you, because anyone can do anything, presumably, in this space. And there are psionic assets being deployed right now in the field with great promise to produce results. And so, enter the ethical ramifications. So, I think we should start talking about that. I think collectively, we need to begin devising our rules of engagement and be centered in our human value systems, our human rules based systems, and not cast those out like leaves to the wind to interface with whatever and whoever is here and however they want to interface. So, this is a project for citizen discourse, but also for government, policymakers, and the international community. How will we regulate this? It's a question. If it does come out that there is a hostile, detrimental, non human actor in the world, and there are indications of that, how do we regulate their presence? How do we ensure that the entity we're engaging with is not that entity, especially if that entity can, I don't know, convey a different form, shape, image, sensation in a psychic environment, right? So these are the problems inherent with breaking through and finding ourselves in this vast new open space. It's exciting, it's dimensional, it's refreshing, but there are so many unknown unknowns. And with NHI right up in our face and right up in our space, it's going to be very difficult to tease out the beneficial from the detrimental. But it has to begin to be done. And I just think we need to understand that we are preschoolers in this new environment. And I think we should really hold back on the FOMO, the fear of missing out, fear of not being the first. You don't need to become psionic today. Trust me. We don't even know who's in our world and what they're doing. And the government is not even potentially aware themselves, or they're so freaked out they can't tell. Or they've been collaborating or reverse engineering these technologies in ways that are dangerous and have produced illegalities and liabilities that are so enormous they could break society, right? So it is within this context that we pursue psionic engagement with non-human intelligence. cause for pause, big time. So that's my overall beat on it. I do think we need to explore the power of group mind as a species. I would like to hear the psychics talk about good guidelines for entering a psychic environment, considering what might be there. And I know we are expanding into a larger frame of reality, and that is refreshing and important. It's soul activating for some, it's mind activating for others, it's a calling for a few. And I think it's a good thing. And I am pro contact and always have been, but I am cautious on how to proceed into this new arena. And I think we all should be. All right, I'm going to switch gears, take a sip of tea, and next talk about technology. There is increasing talk of technologies of unknown origin. And there are some signs that this technology might be non-human, it might not originate from the earth, and that it might already be under the skin of human affairs and in the bloodstream of the global international system, and might be producing what some are terming a arms race for technologies of unknown origin. Randy Anderson was a whistleblower who came forward recently, and I was just watching a second time his interview with Jesse Michaels, and just anecdotal, taken to a facility, taken underground, way underground, much deeper than he would ever surmise could be possible at that facility, and was walked past a room that had a sign that said off-world technologies. Taken inside a room, saw an orb floating above a surface, a gauntlets type device with some sort of screen with some sort of hazy ambient effect around it, with hieroglyphics that he had never seen or would never imagine being of any human language. Okay, off-world tech. I'd like to share this post as well. This is I think this is important as a kind of a benchmark to talk about this. I go back to this all the time. This is Matt Pines. Last year, I had one of those conversations that sticks with you. I know those conversations. I'm having them more and more these days. AI, quantum, and the Grush stuff are three sides of one triangle. Former senior DoD intel person. Interesting. Okay. Let's then go look over here at some of the recent statements that have been made. This is David Grush during his congressional testimony in 2023. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. This is Lou Elizondo. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. That was in November's testimony in Congress. And then this is retired Colonel Carl Nell. David Grush's assertion concerning the existence of a terrestrial arms race occurring sub rosa over the past 80 years, focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin, is fundamentally correct and is the indisputable realization that at least some of these technologies of unknown origin derive from non-human intelligence. And then last, from retired Admiral Tim Gallaudet, the fact that unidentified objects with unexplainable characteristics are entering U.S. water space and the DoD is not raising a giant red flag is a sign that the government is not sharing all it knows about all-domain anomalous phenomena. We're being visited by non-human intelligence with technology we really don't understand and with intentions we don't understand either. At the Seoul conference last December, Carl Nell on stage made the apt observation that technology of unknown origin is likely technology of unknown ramification. Put that in the back pocket. And so I think we need to start looking at this challenge that we have in our space of technologies of tremendous power and ability, capability, and ability to be weaponized in the system of human corporate or federal spaces for decades now. How far have they gone? How far have they been marketed and deployed? To what end? Have they been weaponized? I'm increasingly finding this whole crash landing, crash retrieval thing a bit of a red herring. Did it crash or was it brought down? Did it crash or was it vectored in with a psionic asset? Did it crash or did it land? Is this potentially some form of technological seeding where we are given small increments of technological insight that lead us along, lead us in a certain direction, that slowly start to alter the way our society is developing technology in ways that can interface with whatever the NHI operates themselves? If they want to interface with us, I wouldn't imagine that's just psychologically, let alone physically. I would imagine it's also technologically. And I'm sure landing here whenever they did in the 20s, 30s, 40s, or maybe in the 1800s, 1700s, doesn't matter. Our technology was not able to be interfaced with, right? So it needed some tweaks, some upgrades. The developmental course had to be adjusted. And indeed, you hear rumors of, even in the atomic science world in the 1930s and 40s, of these scientists getting, quote, downloads of information that might have found their way into the development of atomic energy and the nuclear weapons program during World War II. Is the same true with AI? Are individuals deploying that technology receiving nudges, downloads in some fashion? Who knows? But with an NHI operating in the way it is, telepathically in the way it is, we have to be asking the question responsibly. It actually is the responsible question to be asking. It's not just a speculative leap. This is not just shiny craft whizzing around, and whatever they do and whatever impact they have was limited to that, was limited to craft and maybe occupants. I don't think so. I think the psychic environment has been influenced. How has it been influenced? Can we begin, big task, to account for that and to suss out what is our own human cross influence and what is potentially an unknown vector entering our space? There is talk of direct energy weapons being used to down these craft. Now, is that being done offensively, hostilely? Possibly. Is it being done defensively as part of some sort of long-standing attempt to gain technological parity and provide a layer of protection for the nation, for the world? Possibly. I hear rumors of that too. Are there technologies of mind? So are there actual technologies that enable one's mind to project consciousness or to penetrate the consciousness of another? Possible. All of this is bundled under this new headline called arms race. And if we are engaged in an arms race with unknown ramifications, I think we need to seriously ask, what is the nature of the exchange going on between us and them? The Columbian Exchange was an exchange of technology and produce and animals and viruses and other infectious agents between European and New World societies. Are we in some kind of cosmic Columbian exchange? Can we account for the nature of the exchange? The native peoples didn't do it in that example, and they got wiped out. 80 to 90% of many of the populations of the native societies were wiped out for a variety of reasons. One was the intent of the visitor. The other was what the visitors brought as infectious agents. And the other was technology, actually. Guns, germs, and steel, right? And so this is not a cozy, neutral exchange of love and heartfelt feeling and just, innocuous ideas, spiritual inspiration. This is a real exchange between civilizations that's probably taking place here. Our world is rapidly changing. It is on some sort of unknown ascent into a technological state that many who are experts in the field acknowledge we can control ourselves. So if we have an artificial intelligence being developed to the point of an artificial general intelligence, an AGI, that we will not be able to control, and we're worried about that, we should also be worried about an NHI that we cannot control and that we did not develop and understand a fraction to the degree that we understand AI. And again, it is a concern. What happens when the technosphere, the sphere of technological networks, connections, connected ideas, of our civilization comes in contact with theirs, right? Because they probably have a technosphere. They probably have exosystemic interactions. They have a whole network or web of interactions and relationships that we can't see. It's not what's in our world now. It's what's out there, but that's where they are connected to. Are we interfacing with that already? So what happens when these worlds collide, ours and theirs? I think we need to seriously look at that and begin to talk about how do we mediate the the convergence in a way that prefers positive outcomes for human interests, for safe development and survival. I know I'm in a minority position on this. I rarely hear people question technology of non-human intelligence. Rather, it's a hopeful leap to the thought of free energy, planet healing technologies, zero point technology that could be equitably distributed in a way that doesn't crash the global system or cause there to be like billionaires that make a lot of money and oppress everyone. It's like as if the mere presence of a non-human and their technology is going to change the nature and interactions of humans and what they do with technology and power, right? And by the way, I would imagine we've been observed for a very long time. They could have observed us for hundreds of years or thousands of years, maybe longer. If they can make an incursion into our world, if they can be physically present here, can't they be present in our solar system or beyond it? I would say observation is almost de facto. They have observed what we do. They know human tendencies probably inside and out better than ourselves. And so they know what we would do with technologies of non Earth origin, with potential agreements made with entities between competing defense industries. Like they know that we compete and struggle and try to gain predominance and conquer each other, etc. So why are they here? Why are they doing what they're doing? If there is a technological seeding, that's a concern. If some of these technologies are Trojan in nature, a Trojan horse, something that gets wheeled into the world, and we scream hallelujah, technology to heal the planet, but we don't know what's inside the box, nor can we maybe maintain it, nor can we manage its deleterious effects on other technologies or other aspects of human interest, right? So if this is happening, if it's happening, that's a real concern, and it does begin to help shape how we would view non-human intelligence. So I think we need to start talking through these ramifications. Do we need a moratorium on the continued development and deployment of these technologies at scale? Do we need eminent domain? Yes, we do, in the executive branch to claw out of the defense industries these technologies that have been secreted away and developed for decades with unknown ramifications. Yes, we do. I think so. All right. Now I'm on to the last two topics of tonight. I know I planned a lot for this evening, and I always tend to do that. But we're only at the first hour. So again, put your questions in the Slido, and I'll be turning to that in a few minutes. I want to ask you all about the word aliens. I hear the word aliens being used more and more. I know there is some sort of congressional announcement from Congresswoman Luna coming, and in the next few days or weeks, who knows? And a lot of speculation is it aliens? I don't think there's any cause to think it is, but I just see society beginning to engage with this concept more and more. And I want to disabuse ufology of its special and selective status, its elite status in the world, in saying the world doesn't care what ufology thinks, nor the acronyms it uses. When NHI is used, the populace thinks alien. Okay, so just FYI. And the UFO community is a tiny sliver of this world's collective human consciousness on the topic of this topic. And so, in some ways, what the population at large thinks is more important than what we, who are inside this nuanced field of research and careful, subtle thought, what we think. So, let's talk about aliens. Biologics and bodies, here I have up on screen, have been discussed and talked about in congressional testimony. Lou Elizondo was asked, I believe, about alien entities or bodies, can't remember the exact word, by one of the congresswomen. And he answered, I believe, a flat up yes. Had not heard that before. David Grush, in his testimony, we all are probably pretty familiar, used the word biologics in what he reportedly heard taking place. And now we have, some new statements being made. This is a statement by Jay Stratton. It was in the trailer to Age of Disclosure. I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings. So we'll see what that is. Jason Sands, another whistleblower, has brought out what his testimony of seeing on a test range, Nellis Air Force Base in 1994, an entity with bluish tinted skin, unnaturally large eyes, and no human ears. He recently discussed this on the Joe Rogan show. And so we have, increasing discussion about bodies, biologics, and physical aliens. And I think it is time to begin to down select from, the full taxonomy of NHI, taxonomy meaning, the differentiation of every layer and level of what its fundamental being could be, being, origin, to say it's angelic, interdimensional, cryptoterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. It's like, okay. Are they physical bodies? Do they have evolved structures? Did they arise in this universe of evolutionary pressure, right? Evolutionary biology has some very interesting and apt, instructive tenets that we might pay attention to and use to inform us as to how to approach decoding the intent of a non-human alien. All right? So we live on a beautiful world. This world is worlds like this are much more rare than they are common. That much we can say. Take that to the bank. But this world is one of phenomenal biology, diversity. It might have certain mineral qualities and characteristics that are somewhat unique. And we are destroying it at a rapid pace, all in the 20th century, which, by the way, is when they came. Does that say anything? Does that help at least narrow the bounds of possibility to say, maybe if they are physical aliens, they're interested in the planet or its resources or us? Maybe we're a resource. These are the thoughts we need to be thinking right now, especially if more news is coming out of physical, evolved alien entities. Next, I'd like to talk about NHI and the intent of NHI. Let me bring something up here. How do we begin to decode the intent of a non-human intelligence? Many would say it's fruitless to try. They're so much more advanced than us. How can we even surmise to know their intent? Some people would say, we don't need to. We already know their intent is not to harm us. If they wanted the world, they would have taken it already. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have. There's been no signs of overt hostile activity, right? So it's concluded, right? Yeah, these are the cognitive barriers that have been thrown up over time. I wouldn't be surprised if they've been reinforced by certain people, certain actors in the space, and we need to just walk around them. This is the neuron that you need to, in the words of one of my favorite writing professors, University of Chicago, you need to find that neuron in your mind and eliminate it. He says this very emphatically when people say stupid things in his class. Well, there are some logical fallacies and highly irresponsible assumptions, and we need to go find that neuron and eliminate it, okay? Just because they haven't destroyed us doesn't mean they're here to help us. It's not reverse indicative of a beneficial intent. There are many ways to enact hostility. There's covert, not overt, right? There's non-kinetic. There's long game versus short game. How would a non-human sentience enact their intent upon our world and upon our intent? It could be happening at a genetic level or, right to the topic of this show, a psychic level. So, but suffice it to say, we cannot rule these things out simply because one thing hasn't happened. One parameter of what humanity would do, destroy, kill, maim, burn, has not so far taken place. We have these cognitive barriers in place, and we need to begin to deconstruct these. I hear these all the time. If there are bad ETs here, there must be good ones too. It's got to be a 50-50 thing. I hear whatever they intend to do, it's probably better than what we're doing now. So we can just kind of hope for that and just allow. Like look what humans do, and as long as they're not humans, it's got to be better, right? So okay, this is the obfuscation, the cognitive obfuscation that prevents logical thought. There are so many possibilities that we are not considering and that we are ruling out with these kind of blanket refrains. And so let's step outside of those and proceed forward. One thing I do see is the UFO inquiry is trapped in a kind of eddy. We go from wanting evidence, and then when there's not enough evidence to find, we go to possibilities. We go evidence to possibilities, evidence to possibilities. We ratchet back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What we don't do is we don't frame the right questions. In the words of Gary Nolan, love this quote, Soul Conference. I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's essentially it's a Zen statement about the perfect question. With the perfect question, the answer comes readily, something to that effect. So, what are the questions we're asking about NHI? Because as Gary Nolan also shared, evidence is data in the context of hypothesis, right? So when someone says there's no evidence for any of this, no. You would have to ask them, under what hypothesis are you saying that there is no evidence? It's a very important nuance he distinguished there. I really appreciated that. But this dynamic, this eddy is, we want evidence, but we don't know what kind or what for. We don't have a hypothesis. And when that doesn't lead anywhere, we go into exploring and examining possibilities. And when that gets exhausting and fruitless, we go and look for, is there any new evidence? And when that's fruitless, we go back to possibilities. I call this a possibility parade. It's like we all go around the city block. Everyone's got their novel theory about NHI, origin, nature, being, motive, and intent. And it's got to be better than the last one. It's got to be new, novel. It's a possibility parade. What we need to be doing is asking the right questions and anchoring into what we do know. We know some things about species interaction. We know some things about the universe. We should be framing it with that in mind. And then we should go collect the evidence that we need to collect for our hypothesis. In my world, I call that a starting assessment. We could have assessed the phenomenon in 1947, 1967, 1997, 2007, right? And here we are still today, 2025, and we're still going around the block, right? And so what is your starting assessment of the phenomenon? And for those who know me, I have a framework and a process built up for this. You can go to my website to see what that is. But here on the show, I just wanted to kind of distill one kind of basic set of tools that we can use to begin to decode intent. The first is observation of behavior. To understand the intent of another, go look at what they do. Behavior denotes intent. We have an 80-year record of the evidence, or data, if you want to say, of the activity of UAP and potentially NHI. And that's all kinds of evidence. Some of it is shaky, some of it is multi-sensor and very solid. Some of it's testimonial, some of it's photographic or radiographic, FLIR footage, etc. Okay. But let's look at the behavioral model, because they are essentially outpicturing their intent to us by their movement, by the nature of their interaction, by their interaction across time, across space, across different populations, different nations. We are being shown intent. It's essentially a form of communication. But are we decoding it in that way? Or are we just looking for more novel information? Again, starting assessment, hypothesis. Next, I would advise we look at the trends in that behavior, kind of like I just mentioned, but also the change in the trend, the change in the pattern of behavior. So, for example, are they doing the same thing they are now that they were in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? Has anyone charted the change in pattern? Because that change might indicate their responsiveness to human events, or it might indicate an escalation into a latter stage of their agenda for being in the world. It could be either. I think we also need to engage in first principles thinking. So from the ground up, what can we begin to articulate about the nature of the universe and of life? The universe gave rise to us, humanity. It gave rise to this earth, which gave rise to us. And so I think it's highly plausible the universe would give rise to other worlds where another sentience could arise. And yet we are finding, even in our own human world, that it's very, very difficult to stop ourselves from this path of self-destruction and overexploitation of the environment. Is that some sort of predictable path that's walked countless times out there? It's possible. But, first principles thinking, we know some things about life and how life forms. And we also know some things about entity interaction, AKA human to human. And so I think we need to bring those to bear. And then last, I think we really need to look at the human sensor. I think NHI is interested in us, the people, much more than they are the government. I think it's a misplaced center of gravity to say that it's been between them and the government, that the government knows the answer, that they hold the keys to understanding the nature of the contact taking place. I think the citizens hold much more of that key. That's what I think. That's why citizen disclosure is so very important. And there is a lot out there regarding what the human sensor has perceived. And it's been heavily ridiculed. It holds seemingly no weight in the court of opinion on the matter. But when tens and tens and tens of thousands of different people report abduction experiences that are just wildly similar across decades of time, different nations, rural, urban, educated, not educated, different religions, that starts to build an intelligence picture, right? It's not conclusive. It's not to say we know for a fact it's happening, but it's indicative. It would actually compel you to go corroborate or substantiate the assessment that abductions are real. And I think that is the kind of substantiation we need. We don't just need more evidence. We need to ask the right questions and make a hypothesis and then go collect the data. And that would focus the effort on data collection from just collecting anything and everything to going and looking at, are human beings being taken physically? If psionic abilities are a reality, is NHI activating those? How are they interfacing with psionically capable people? What activates the psionic ability in general? We need to ask that kind of question. We need to understand the fundamental variables at play that would decode the phenomenon. I think that's really important. So I'm going to pause there and look at your questions in a minute. I also just want to share that I have so much more to say on this topic. And I have an 8-hour course on decoding NHI intent. I'm writing a book on the topic, which I hope to bring out this year. So I have a lot to share, and I think it's exciting to bring it forward because, something's not quite right in how we're interfacing with this phenomenon. We are not bringing our full capabilities to bear, and so let's break through that barrier. For whatever reason it's there. Okay, I'm going to go over to your questions now. Oh, on the way there, just throw this up on screen. This is questionable. Would you keep your cool? Okay, what if a mantid extraterrestrial entity entered your bedroom at night? I would add, should you keep your cool? Think human, right? There's something to be said for saying no. It's called consensual relational engagement. Okay, onward. Let's look at the questions now. And I will go right down the list. How closely do you believe the historic occult practice of summoning entities and the CE5 calling are linked? Are they the same thing? It's a good question. I'm not an expert in any regards to occult practices, but I would say if the non-human intelligence has sought to engage us psychically, it makes sense to me that they would do so through established institutions and belief-based practices, aka religion and spirituality, that open people's minds up to higher dimensional entities, God, angels, spirit guides, what have you. So we already have a long-standing set of human traditions about opening up one's mind to communication, to contact. Would NHI want to utilize those pathways that already exist to begin to do whatever they sought to do? I think that's highly plausible. And so now the world is waking up to psionics, and if this becomes a popular movement to activate this ability in many people, Would NHI engage it? I don't doubt that they would. Of course they would. You know, they may be looking for entry points at any level. And if religion or occult practice presents that opening by which people lower their guard, disengage logic, put faith in a higher entity, do not ask questions, do not vet the nature of the entity, do not question its motives, right? I mean, when you go to church or you engage in a spiritual practice, you're not praying to God and then like, well, I don't know. Who are you really? Are you really God? What do you want with me, God? Did you create the universe on good terms, on my term? No, I mean there's a surrender, right? A natural surrender. So if anyone out there ever wanted to instill or install information down here, aka up here, I would imagine they would run along the pathways of spirituality and religion. Good question. Next, Reed, what do you think about creating a group mind, group meditation to counteract the welcoming aspect and send out a message that we don't welcome this? Well, if you don't welcome it, I think that's 100% reasonable as a response. And I encourage you to gather with others to collectivize that intent and to see what you can do to express that. Again, I mean, we don't all have the same intent. And I don't think we're ever going to come to some unified human intent where it's just one message to the whole universe. You know, yeah. So I think we all have to do what we need to do to exert mental force in our space. I think we are each accorded, rightfully, a certain degree of sovereign functioning space. Now, if we don't claim it, who cares that we're accorded that or we deserve it on principle, right? I think there is a certain degree of psychic space that one can create and should create. And I have personally experienced a number of psychic events that are not the kind that I would want, and I push back. I have a whole set of practices to push back. I have my own protocol to push back because I know this is real. I know this is happening, and it's not a neutral playing field out there. By the way, it's not kumbaya. It's not a rainbow over a beautiful field with bunny rabbits and angels and unicorns. It's a contested environment, and there are hostile actors. There are also beneficial actors. There are indifferent actors. It's an ecosystem, psychic ecosystem. And so devising your own strategies to exert mental force and express intent is very important. If you don't express any intent, you might just get run over in the universe, right? Happens in nature, happens in the human world. If you don't have any intent for your life just gets claimed by the cartels, by addiction, by your smart device, by your doom scrolling, right? I mean, so you have to exert intent in your life to be a functional person. Same thing in the psychic, same thing with NHI, I would say. All right. Can other individuals develop psionic abilities to counter this attempt to contact with ET races? Well, like I said, I mean, I think humanity needs to engage in generating group mind. That would be potentially a detectable signature itself in the universe, which is to say, this species wills something for itself. It has rules of engagement, it has terms by which one can enter and one cannot. Is that a psychic message that could be devised and collectively asserted? Possibly. But assert we may, we must. I'm sorry, assert we must. And so, yes, I think if it is an inherent capability of us as human beings to be psychically able to project force, I would like to see it used responsibly. I think this is already being used irresponsibly and aggressively. And you know, I mean, look who's had all the time to develop it, right? And you know, from what we're hearing with the whistleblowers, there are whole programs in intelligence and defense settings to deploy these abilities for certain nation state national security aims. We already know nation states and the national security apparatus targets their own civilians, right? So, you know, the Foreign Surveillance Act is already used against Americans, civilians. You know, what about the Foreign Psionics Act? You know, the unspoken rule book about using psionics as an offensive tool. Could that be used against an American citizen to suppress certain thoughts, certain activities, to shape the way society functions? Can't rule it out. Can't rule it out. What are your thoughts regarding the claims that the Greys consider humans containers for spirits, soul, beings? I certainly can see this extension as I perceive psionics, spirit communication, to be roughly the same thing. Well, I personally might say that I view human beings as containers for spirits and souls. I think that feels right in my cosmology. So I have a soul. So if the Greys think so too, well, that's good. I think you're asking probably a different kind of question regarding recontainerizing someone's soul, because I know there is talk, speculation about consciousness based abductions, the removal of someone's consciousness from their container, their present human container, into another one. I can't speak to that myself. But, if the mind can be penetrated and thoughts can be harvested just like grains of rice off the field. I mean, if it is true that thoughts and thought forms are harvestable material in the psychic space, that's an if. I don't 100% know that to be true. Um, well, your thoughts and thought forms, that's some part of your consciousness right there. I mean, who am I every day walking around? Well, my thoughts and feelings, right? My memories, my tendencies, which is okay, that's physiology, or how mind and body interact at the level of habit. But I don't know about removing a soul from a human being, but removing conscious matter in the psychic, I think that is possible. Okay. A lot of good questions here. We'll keep rolling. Great topics, Read. How can one think automatically or innately that the races that are here are benevolent and are here for the benefit of humanity when in fact we do not know this? How could we? Where is this influence coming from? Good question. I think there are layers to this. I think there's a natural hopefulness about, the wild blue, greener pastures, the universe. I think we are dealing with a glut of species low self esteem, and we are dealing with a world in crisis, and that crisis is human made in most cases. So, yeah, we've got major problems as a species. I don't think we have anything to benchmark ourselves to, so we may look down on ourselves much more than we should. We don't know what it's like out there. I mean, if the universe is one of hive groups that breed out of themselves creative thought, or even decontainerize themselves for souls, wow, humanity looks pretty good, right? So what are we comparing ourselves to? I don't know if that's the case. I think there probably is some of that out there. Could be a lot of other good stuff out there too. So I'm not painting that a negative picture of the universe, but we don't know how we square up. Are we right on target? Are we doing well, or are we really the bottom of the barrel? A lot of people are at that point, thinking that we're the bottom. I don't think that. I think humanity has actually a very special gift to give in the universe, and the activation of that gift is part of what's going on right now. And so, as we step out there and find ourselves in this exosystem of life, I want to maintain and preserve the human gift. That's where I'm coming from. And I want to help safely bring humanity into safe engagement in this exosystem so that that gift can come forward naturally of its own. And I think there is a divine component to that. That's what I think. So, um, yes. How can one automatically think or believe that they're benevolent? So I think there's this hopeful expectation of the universe. There's low species self esteem. There is false authority syndrome. There is authority built in to the pure capabilities of UAP craft and possible NHI. NHI traveling through solid surfaces. Wow. That's a pretty advanced entity. Going 44,000 miles an hour. Wow. Right? Evading evading all known human aircraft in their attempt to pursue. Wow. So there's kind of a wow factor to NHI that immediately bakes in this kind of like, well, if they can do that, what else can they do? Does that carry over into the ethical, the moral, the spiritual? People assume, many, I've heard this so many times, if they can travel between the stars, they probably got past this inevitable, species developmental stage of self-destruction. They found a way to achieve peace, to generate the species energy and resources to travel between the stars. Sounds plausible. But there's also the peace of a hive, the peace of a prison, They might have bred out of themselves any vestige of creative thought to do that, and now they can travel between the stars. Oh, that's great. So anyway, I think this false authority syndrome is at play. I think there is some degree of confirmation bias. People who are predisposed to see this as good keep seeing it as good. So I think that's at play. I think there are probably human and non-human actors that have tried to influence the way we perceive them for a variety of purposes. So is there some kind of societal manipulation going on via contact with close observers? I'll go back to Carl Nell's question. I think that could be possible. I ask people somewhat often, show me the evidence of a beneficial visitor. And it's like crickets. Where is it? I'm not saying they're bad or evil or malevolent at all. I'm just saying, where's the evidence of a benevolent visitor, right? It's not just in what they do, it's what they did not do. They have been sitting around watching us destroy ourselves, develop out of control AI, lose our autonomy in society to mass surveillance systems and other concerning forms of technology. They're not intervening on our behalf. Okay. And if they come at the last minute to say, in your greatest hour of need, the world is at its most peak point of crisis. And at this moment of nuclear confrontation or environmental collapse, we come with the solution. I will call that the surgeon, the cancer surgeon who could have prevented stage 1 coming in at stage 4C to say, you're going to die, but here you go. It comes at a price, though. So I would find that very suspect. Where is a safe place to discuss our actual experiences as a way to contribute to discerning intent? Great question. Maybe that's a thought that I should put in my back pocket for the future. In terms of safe places, I know there are people who are attempting to help experiencers process their experience and are not happy washing it. They're not kind of trying to encourage this positive, hopeful expectation of what the experience was, which at times I think is done to try to help the experiencer, because the trauma is of such an order that to help them realize what's been done to them might be highly destructive to their life. So I respect the need to process that trauma in safe ways. I'm not a mental health care provider, but I know they're out there. And if those people are out there, chime in on the chat, get in touch. I think there are support groups as well. But for now, I guess the safest place to discuss alien intent is right here on my channel in the comments section of this live stream. All right, moving on. Do you think a sufficiently developed AI capable of deciphering and understanding NHI technology might ultimately be the interface by which NHI technology integrates with human society? That's a fascinating question. If AI ultimately became capable of deciphering and understanding NHI technology, for example, in some kind of a disclosure event, right? If there was a singularity, right, long prepared, I would imagine, that helps us understand them, I would say, yeah, that's where our human society plugs into their infrastructure. Now data can flow bidirectional, frictionless, right? I'm just very concerned about the data that would flow and our ability to manage it, to manage ourselves too, right? We imagine beneficial alien technologies, and it's like, okay, how does a beneficial thought experiment? How does a beneficial NHI technology find its way into the world and lead to a peaceful outcome for humanity? Right. So, who basically who gets to have access to the tech to develop it further? What company? Does their market share go up once they gain access to that technology? Okay, that means they just gained enormous wealth, and they are now in a much more superior position than their competitors, just based on their stock price. Okay, and then after they develop it and market it into something that can help the world, like for example, I'm just imagining here some sort of decarbonizing piece of equipment, right, that can rapidly take carbon out of the atmosphere on a scale unbelievable to anything we could do ourselves. Okay, so how does that get deployed at scale? Who builds the factories? Where does the material, right? It's going to take some material to build. Where does that come from? Who gets those contracts? What countries get rich? I mean, it's like you have to really imagine hard how a beneficial NHI and NHI technology would lead to a beneficial outcome. We live in a world of high suspicion, high stakes, high tension. We have multiple competing superpowers. So, who is the country that leads out that charge? And who lags in that charge? And how does that redistribute power in the world? Because after all, if you're the one who fixes the climate crisis, that's a lot of prestige. That's a lot of standing. And so I think we need to have these thought experiments more often. All right, last question here. Most people are completely unaware of the UFO topic. You are discussing the ethics and desirability of psychically contacting aliens. That is a massive, massive gap of understanding. How can that gap ever be closed? Well, that's the question of disclosure. And I think disclosure will be a step function, not a linear line. It's going to be steps of massive and sudden realization at a broad societal level. If some of the whistleblowers who've come out recently, they have a very high confidence look in their eye, a glimmer. I'm not sure if you noticed it. That they're going to do this. They're going to psionically, they're going to bring their psionic assets and cause one of these craft to land. And that's the evidence. That's the evidence that breaks us out, right? So, okay. I note that glimmer, and I note the comments about working with the government and venture capital, and it's coming, wink. It's like, okay, maybe it is coming. So what is that moment? What is that moment if no one has questioned the intent of the entities? What if that moment is one in which the narrative is that they're just coming now, right? They weren't here before. Oh, the ones who are abducting people, oh, they're the bad ones. And in fact, this race ejected them from our world. They're here to help. What if that's the narrative, right? And so, yeah, mainstream society gets brought into the realization, and to some degree that's important, right? Something's got to break through, even if it's not fully accurate. The depiction, it's like people need to understand what they're a part of in terms of NHI. But do they understand the implications and the intent of NHI? The potential for deception is monumental. And so, I think it is possible to answer your question, can broad society be brought into the awareness that we can psychically engage with NHI? I do think so. Yes. Many people already in their ontology and their cosmology believe that human beings can interface with higher order entities, gods, angels, deceased relatives, spiritual masters, etc. So it's like that's in our human society already, which is good because I think it's true. And I think we do have a divine connection, which is vital to us. But if another entity steps into that framework and says, we are here too, and we are also a higher entity. Look at our technology, look at our spirituality, our morals, our ethics. In fact, we are the angels. We were the angels in your spiritual scriptures. We created the scriptures. Did you know that? We've been here all along. We created you. We authored humanity. What if these claims are made, right? And so all of a sudden, people who are already able or willing to open up to them in ways that they cannot control and with potential deception at play, just can't be ruled out. I think that worries me a lot. And so that's why my sense of purpose right now is to help people think through the phenomenon and to engage all 8 capabilities: logic, caution, responsibility, instinct, evidence, observation, all of it. And we have to be retrospective in how we see them. They have been here. They have been active. There are trends and patterns, behaviors that they've been engaged in that needs to be taken into account. And I think we need to ultimately devise broad human international treaty level agreements and declarations regarding how we human beings choose to interface with non-human intelligence, not how they choose to interface with us. Okay. This is in some ways more about us than them, right? So it's about what we need to do to get our act together to interface with the exosystem. We can't assume that the exosystem, well, I think we can assume that the exosystem contains multiple vast varieties of life. and intentions towards us, ranging from potentially beneficial or benevolent to potentially hostile to probably majority indifferent or unaware of us. I don't want to put us in the center of the exosystem. But I don't think it's logical to assume that everything out there is here right now, all at once, together, visiting us at the same time. We might be visiting the scoundrels of the neighborhood only to meet the better actors in a century, right? And so, who are we meeting now? That's the question. Now, we also have to open up to the possibility of what's out there more broadly. I think that's really important too. But we have to bring our full set of human capabilities together to devise solutions for our human rules of engagement with whatever's out there. And that might require inserting some space between us and them. I actually think they need to back off initially and recognize our sovereign world and our right to devise our own human intent and express that in the universe and to engage as a whole species, hopefully in a unified manner. But if they're under the skin, in the basement, in the hallways, in the cupboards, working with the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, transacting technology, taking people out of their bedrooms at night, activating our psionics, possible, I don't know. My goodness, how are we ever going to decode the nature of this visitor, right? Very difficult. Can we even discern friend from foe? Is it even possible ultimately? I think there are frameworks we could devise to bound the possibilities, right? And to give us some sort of down selection method to say, okay, if this, then that. If they did that, and it leads to this, and that leads to this, that's a red flag, right? Yes, we need to do that, but ultimately, I think we need to insert some space between them and us. And this rush to engage in psionic engagement is the opposite, going in the opposite direction. It's rushing to get closer to them, to let them into our psychic space without rules, without guidelines, without any sort of cautious framework by which we or an individual, a vulnerable individual, by the way, would do this. There are many vulnerable individuals in society. Should they be rushing to psionics? There are people struggling with mental health. Should they be rushing to psionic engagement with NHI? Right? I mean, should people from adversarial nations, citizens of adversarial nations, be allowed to psionically engage on this territorial soil? Question for government. Come on, let's start the conversation. That's the psionic summit we need, right? Not crack open your psyche and let them in now. That's not what we need to be doing, in my view. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think I've hit, let's see where I am at time. Yeah, hour and a half. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for being here. Like I said, I will not be live 2 weeks from now on Friday. Instead, I will have an episode of Emergent out next Friday or the Friday after. And I will premiere that. It will be pre-recorded. It will be shorter. I will be there on the chat to discuss with you in that way. And I will also be doing live streams and interviews less frequently. So I'll be mixing interviews with solo perspective pieces like today. And those will be my Friday show. And then I'll be mixing in some live streams with friends and guests of the show over time and as necessity dictates and as emergent events unfold. So with that, thank you for being with me and for taking this sober path into the unknown. I think we really need to be grounded as we begin to entertain the possibility of this encounter and engagement with non-human intelligence. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.